Welcome to the Conscious Eating Summit. I'm your host, Dr. Nancy Kroll. I am very excited to have with me today Jessica Flannigan. Jessica is a healing visionary, author of The Loving Diet, and the certified noetic practitioner. Thank you so much, Jessica, for coming here and talking to us, because I feel Jessica has an extremely important view when it comes to diet, and specifically diets when it comes to autoimmune conditions. So I'm really blessed that you're going to share with us your take on this.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Before we get started, do you mind sharing with our viewers, first of all, what is a noetic practitioner? Because I think that might be a term that not all of our viewers know. And then also, what drives you? Why are you in this field? And, what got you to this point?
So noetic field therapy, or being a noetic practitioner, is working through the consciousness of loving with people's morphogenic field to help them resolve any limiting beliefs that might be sitting in their morphogenic field. This is important because it becomes the lens to which we look out to life. And the universe can only give us what we create, promote, or allow. And so when we clear up beliefs that are literally sitting out as forms in our morphogenic field, then we're able to have a deeper connection to both ourselves and to the universe. And so I help people clear up beliefs that are usually, that we develop over time by having hard or traumatic events, or things where basically untruths about ourselves, usually relating to God or loving or worth.
Interesting. I'm just curious, when you said noetic fields, these beliefs, when you're doing the work, is it basically an interaction like Q&A between you and the other person, or is there also a sense of are you able to feel or sense things of another person that they aren't able to see?
So in old times, it was called like aura balancing, but there's two different parts of a noetic balancing. The first is silent, and so that's a physical, and then there's the mental, emotional, and the spirit and the soul. And so part of it, there is talking. And so people lay down on a table. I use a pendulum to help guide me to where the blocks are in the morphogenic field. And we use the body as the interface for where there might be any limiting beliefs or blocks in the morphogenic field. And so, yes, there is talking involved.
Yeah, that's really cool. Are you able to work with practitioners, like clients from afar, or do they have to come to you?
So I can do it remotely, and a lot of the nature of my work these days, my clinical nutrition practice has expanded to include my work as a noetic balancer, because there's so often issues and beliefs about food and nourishment and healing. And so I have expanded. So I do just a noetic balancing laying on a table, both in person and remotely. But I also have transferred a lot of those skills of talking with my clients and working in the consciousness of loving in everything that I do now at this point in my life.
So I actually skipped like a huge part of what you do, which is microbiome work, right? You're a nutritionist as well?
Yes, I'm a clinical nutritionist, and I work a lot these days in microbiome restoration.
Yeah.
And I've been in the field of practicing nutrition, autoimmune and paleo nutrition now for 5 years. So I'm a leader in that movement. And actually what's happened is I've pulled away from that diet as the science has progressed, and I work a little bit more in microbiome restoration and helping a lot of people get off of AIP when they're stuck on it. That's a lot of my clients are people who had heard the message that they need to fix themselves to heal, and that they need to fix their disease, and they need to fix their beliefs and misunderstandings, fix their life, really, their immune system. And so then they do it through restriction And the autoimmune paleo diet is a version of that restriction that was meant to be a temporary diet that's now hybridized into a movement and a lifestyle. And so now the bulk of my practice is really people who are down to 10 foods. Their immune system is not functioning well anymore. A lot of them have had relapses, and they have a lot of disordered eating too.
Yeah. I think it's worth saying there might be a few viewers that aren't familiar with the AIP diet. So it's a paleo diet aimed for, individuals with an autoimmune condition. And maybe you could share the foods that it restricts.
So it's called the autoimmune paleo diet, and it is supposed to be a very temporary restrictive diet that I very much encourage anybody hearing this to work with a very skilled practitioner before they even go on it, because it tends to work well in a very short term when you're working with a practitioner who knows and understands how to find co-infections and heal gut dysbiosis. But it's essentially a paleo diet that has no nuts, no seeds, no nightshades, no eggs.
Okay, and that's because those tend to be inflammatory. So the idea behind it is that you restrict them while you're doing another protocol to help heal the gut.
Yes, but now what we know is that that was somewhat of a guess. So we guessed by we guessed about the foods that we know are actually inflammatory. So we know that egg whites or eggs can be inflammatory, and nightshades can be inflammatory, nuts and lectins in the nuts. But what we know now, because so much science has progressed in the last 5 years, is that what is inflammatory to me and you, like you specifically, might not be inflammatory to me. That doesn't discount that there's a general inflammation, with foods, or with, for instance, the standard American diet or eating grains. So we don't discount that. But what we know now is that oftentimes inflammatory foods are very individual in nature.
So do you recommend people doing, I know we're going to direct this in a different way, but I'm just curious, do you have people actually do food sensitivity testing then to help heal the gut?
I do, but I do it in a timely manner. So it's never the first thing that I do. Usually I do an organic acid test and a stool test, like a GI map test are my two favorites. And I look at that. I look at the relationship that people have to their circumstances, their diagnoses, their illness, their physical body. And I work on that a little bit first. Put them on maybe just a very easy general anti-inflammatory diet like paleo. And then once we've cleared up the gut, because so much cross-reactivity can happen between food antigens and bacteria and viruses in the gut, I tend to have that be more of a downstream.
Yeah, like if it doesn't clear up by then you start to go, yeah, that makes sense. So we're going to talk about why issues you have about food can be the way through, which I think is very interesting. So can you tell me how someone relates to food actually affects their relationship to their own illness?
Well, we always start with what the heart is doing and what you believe about your life. And I find that when we start there, then we get a tremendous amount of information then about, how we're nourishing our heart, ourself, our souls is often the first place. And food is just an extension or a reflection of how that kind of nourishment.
What's interesting about that is that in Oriental medicine, so there's like a few different schools of thought with Oriental medicine of what the kind of center of health is. And one belief is that the earth is the center, which would be digestion. Another belief is that the fire element is the center, which is the shen, which is spirit, like as if you're saying. And then another belief is the water element, which is the kidneys, which has to do with your jing or your prenatal essence. And I just think it's interesting that you're talking about, to me, what you're saying when you're talking about the heart is that going back to if the spirit is healthy, then everything else follows. And I just think that's a very powerful way of looking at it.
Because we're told in almost most health movements, even in therapy, we need to fix our bad childhood. We need to fix our career. We need to fix our inflammatory diet. That is, we need to fix our disease. And so this perspective of like, it's the way through, provides us with a different kind of substrate, which is use everything to lift. Everything can be used as compost in the garden of your heart. And so when we take that perspective, then nothing is against us. Everything can be a tool for growth and healing if we create a different relationship or a different perspective to look at it.
Yeah. It's interesting, when you were talking, I was feeling kind of a softness around it, right? And what's interesting about that as well to me is that in Oriental medicine, all pain, whether it's emotional or physical, comes from stagnation of energy, right? So there's a contraction there. And whenever there's a free flow, there's health, right? You want to be able to experience everything, the good and the bad. And it's only when there's a contraction or a stagnation that disease happens. And so when you were talking, I just felt kind of this softness of like, allowing, right? So allowing radical acceptance, kind of this free flow of energy. And it makes total sense to me that if someone's able to kind of soften their reaction to maybe something that's happening in their body, that actually allows for the health to come back rather than that. That's a kind of a contracted response, right? To fix it, right?
So there's lots of different ways to look at that, right? Like stagnation. So like grief is a very normal feeling, and it's very healthy. But when grief gets stagnated, then it can cause blockages. But then the other part is that we're all here, us humans, having experiences. And so even the idea of like having a stagnation means you know what you're tripping over, And so we can even say like, oh, isn't that so cool? Like we're humans, we're here, we're having this experience with these things. And sometimes we have stagnation. And so that, you know what you're tripping over means you maybe can identify it more quickly the next time it comes about. Or you could say, hi, old friend, it's you again. Let's work cooperatively to, let's, so that everything becomes the gift.
I love that. So what have you, can you talk a little bit more about the belief systems? I think we've talked a little bit about energy, but you have talked about like trauma and relationship to food. And I was wondering if you could go a little bit deeper into that, about how our belief system actually matters whenever we're eating.
So beliefs are kind of like a stagnation, right? So we have difficult things happen to us, and often we make judgments about what has happened to us in order to survive a difficult thing. And those beliefs are usually not true. So for instance, you were abandoned as a baby. And so you then decide that because you were abandoned as a baby, that you're unlovable, you're not worth love, God forgot about you. And so essentially those things are not true, but you decided them. A lot of times we decide things to help our minds manage hard things so that we can get through them. And so they have a quality of survival, which is important. But then what happens is that those beliefs then become the lens to which we look out to life, and life can only meet us through that lens. So I like to clear those up, help my clients clear them up through the consciousness of loving and self-forgiveness. And so self-forgiveness, or essentially loving ourselves, loving those parts, those misunderstandings that hold those beliefs, is a way to really clear that up, and then, have a better communication with our life.
I'm curious, like when you say helping your clients first with self-forgiveness, is this a conscious choice they have to make? Or, what sort of practice can help someone move to that place?
Well, Ho'oponopono is a very established, effective way to do this. So Ho'oponopono is the ancient Huna technique of resolution through living love. And so oftentimes when I'm talking to my clients, I am very present and I'm observing in a very loving way, and I'm listening to what they say. And so I reflect back to them what they said. And then often we use that as the springboard to go into the self-forgiveness technique. So for instance, a lot of my clients say, I've lost hope, I'm hopeless, and so the mantle of hopelessness then is how the universe meets them. So they might have a lot of experiences that are coming to them to help work through that idea of hopelessness. Hopelessness oftentimes will come into a lack of worth. And so so people will believe that they're actually not worth a healing because God forgot about them because they were abandoned as a child. And so I really use my clients' words and experiences and what they're reporting to me to help navigate the way through that. And then I develop or, just use self-forgiveness with them. So I was like, we just heard that you feel like you're not going to be worth healing. God isn't going to deem you worth a healing. And so it's very simple. I forgive myself for believing that I'm not worthy of healing.
So you work mostly with people with an autoimmune condition, which when we kind of break that down, it's the self attacking the self, right? Mm-hmm. And, we're talking about this idea of these old patterns that, are not allowing the body to health. How does the actual microbiome and the kind of dietary and the actual, that seems like what we're talking about seems more like psycho-emotional, I guess. Mm-hmm. And then the diet and the gut bacteria and stuff feels more physical to me. Yeah. I'm just curious how those interplay or how you see those interplay most often. Like, do you feel that when they fix the psycho-emotional, everything else resolves, or you kind of have to have an interplay of the two?
Yeah, there's a certain layer of trust when we are awakening the consciousness inside of our heart that we can trust what shows up. And so we want healing to show up. If someone gets diagnosed with cancer, we want, it's a natural human wanting to be cured. I have, through the work that I do, I've let go of expectations about what the highest good for each person is. So I've loosened my definition where really the feeling joy in your life, whether or not your physical body has healed, is more of a yardstick. And so, we do this work, and yes, the microbiome follows. And sometimes we do it just because it's practical, so if you have candida in your gut, then a practical way through that is to deal with the candida. And oftentimes, it's just practical is not existential. And so did God forget about me is more of an existential thing. Mm-hmm. So I guess I'm kind of quick on my feet in that regard. I work both in the existential parts of my client's journey and then also in the practical parts. Mm-hmm. Sometimes they cross, like what you're talking about, does that work on the microbiome? And sometimes it doesn't. And I trust that there's something deeper being awakened in my client's healing journey, discovering what it is that illness is here to awaken them to is where I place my foundational trust.
I love that. I love that because it's just it has more depth to it. I think that it's so easy to get so focused on just what's happening wrong in the body, right? There's so much more to the being than just the body.
Well, look at all the enlightened beings who have graced the planet. They came with physical issues, many of them severe. But what they did was they changed their relationship to those physical issues. So the heart becomes such the leader in your life through trust, compassion, and vulnerability that what the physical body is doing and how that's being managed isn't the center. Because it's almost like that's the ego thing. The ego is saying you're either passing or failing based on what your body's doing. And so we don't discount that. We remain very practical to it. But we continually look at how are we waking up through the journey of the heart, and coming back to that place, and then checking in to see what's going on in the body versus checking in the body to see what's going on in the heart. We can do that, and it's a great way. But I tend to place a little bit more of my focus on trusting that process to unfold in a way that serves each of my clients best.
Yeah, I love that. I was just curious, do you have an autoimmune condition?
I've never gotten tested.
Yeah.
I don't know the answer to that. My twin sister has Hashimoto's and celiac, and have it in my family history, but I have not tested myself for it.
Yeah, what's funny is that I have a lot of autoimmune conditions in my family, and I've just been managing my health on my own, like in intuition, like through diet, but I just basically got lab work done recently, just out of curiosity. I'm like, do I have Hashimoto? I mean, I don't know. I mean, just out of curiosity of what the numbers say. I mean, I don't feel like I do, but like, I thought, well, I work with a lot of clients on this. Maybe I should actually just see if I have it, Yeah, so I was just curious.
Yeah.
So you have a free gift for our viewers. Can you share with us what it is?
I do. So I'm giving away my my AIP one dish. So it's 30 AIP recipes that I put together in an ebook that are prepared in one dish in 30 minutes or less.
Which is awesome because that makes it super easy. I don't know if anyone on here has ever done AIP, but it can be stressful for some people because what they're used to cooking is no longer available. So having that as an option is really awesome. So everyone, if you want to go download that, just go back to the email that this interview's in, and the link will be there for you. I have one more question for you. If you could give any advice to your younger self, what would it be?
That my loving is enough. Almost makes me tear up.
I know. I feel like
I've had moments of being young where I wondered, like, is it going to all be okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I look back at my early years, and I think, gosh, yeah, I don't think I loved myself at all. It was like a process of unfolding, of realizing that you're worthy of love as is,
Yeah. Because, we throw that word around, right? We throw the word self-love is thrown around like gluten-free is now. Yet when I talk to people, I get asked more often, probably the biggest question is, I don't know how to do it. Like, how do I even start? It feels like Mars to most people. And yet it's such a buzzword right now. And when I really had to go through and I made a conscious decision to love myself as God loves me, it shook the house. And I had to admit I didn't know anything. And that was a very humbling moment. And yet that put me into the student mind, which is where the universe can greet you and say, you're open. And, saying you don't know is it's a very open spiritual place. But when I was younger, I wanted to know everything and be an expert. And now the older I get, I'm like, yeah, I don't really know much.
I know. I think that's interesting. I think the more you know, the more you realize you don't know. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us today. It was a pleasure.
Thank you for your work, Nancy.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you all for joining us today. Please check your inbox tomorrow for the next interview for the Conscious Eating Summit. Bye.